Well, hey, Jeff Shore back with you as we continue to talk about this subject of sales follow-up and what to do after the customer says no. How do we stay with that customer until when? Well, until their problem is solved. That's really what we're looking for here. And when we're thinking about sales follow-up, a lot of this has to do with our mindset. Now, I started to talk about that in our first video, but I want to talk about something right now called the resistance. Now, that's a term that I'm borrowing from the author, screenwriter, and genius Steven Pressfield. He talks about in his book, The War of Art. You've probably read the book or heard of the book, The Art of War. This is the war of art. He talks about the resistance, that which holds us back, that which stands in our way and says, no, don't do it. That resistance is real, but it takes place entirely up here between our ears. What do we do to bust through the resistance? Now, you're going to find when it comes to follow-up, there are a number of different things that could fall under the banner of resistance, but we're going to look at two in particular that make a huge difference. One is telephobia, the idea that many salespeople are far more comfortable face-to-face than they are on the telephone. And yet we find that so much of the follow-up work needs to be by telephone. People with high degrees of telephobia tend to look at it and say, the customer doesn't want me to bother them. The customer doesn't want a phone call, so I'll just send a text or I'll just write an email instead. Well, here's the problem with that. How many texts and emails do you think they're going to get in the course of a day? I mean, I know for me, it used to be if you want to reach me, don't call me, send me an email. And then I got to the point where I was getting so many emails, I would say, if you want to reach me, send me a text. But now I get a text, I'm busy at the time, so the text just gets forgotten about, and I tell people, if you really want to reach me, make the phone call. Here's my concern. Salespeople with a lot of telephobia tend to think that their customers themselves don't want the phone call simply because they don't want to make it. And I'm going to suggest to you that short of a face-to-face conversation, the second most effective conversation is voice-to-voice. You've got to pick up the phone. Now, you got to have something meaningful to say, and we'll address that as we move on in this series. But I'm going to tell you that next to a face-to-face conversation, the next most effective way to connect with a customer is voice-to-voice. So one of the issues we deal with is telephobia. The other thing that we deal with is what I call comfort addictions. Now, I wrote a whole book about this called Be Bold and Win the Sale, about how we deal with our comfort addictions. But I'm going to suggest to you that if you have a strong desire for comfort, and if your strong desire for comfort prevents you from doing that which is in your customer's best interest, you're not doing your job right. So what do we have to do? We have to decide right now that when it's time to make the call, we're going to make the call. Now that's a decision I need to make in advance of the call. If I wait until it's time to call, I get really uncomfortable, and then I think of 1,000 other things I need to do other than make the call. You need to plan for that in advance. You are going to face uncomfortable moments in the sales process. It happens. So this week, what I want you to do is to tackle both of those by a little pre-planning. Whether it's telephobia or a general comfort addiction, what I want you to do is take that time when you're planning your week and you're planning when you are going to make your follow-up calls. Don't just drop a point on the calendar and say, I'm going to make these calls at 3 o'clock today or at 4 o'clock tomorrow, whatever it is. Don't stop there. I want you to go through and I want you to get your mindset straight at the time that you are planning it. So I'm looking at it and saying, it's 11 o'clock now. I'm going to make my follow-up calls at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Take the time at 11 o'clock to think through what will your mindset be at 2 o'clock. Plan that you're going to have some discomfort. Plan that you're going to have some telephobia, but make the decision now in advance of the calls. And that will give you the mental strength when it's time to make the calls to actually do it. It's called, actually, the principle is called cognitive behavioral therapy. It's used widespread all around the world, but you can apply it right here. Plan now for the discomfort you will face. It'll make all the difference when it's time to serve your customer.